Guest this evening. He's been in the music business for 6 decades. In fact, when he first took to the stage in the 1960s, in the early 60s, several people advised him not to give up his day job as a welder. I'm pleased to say he ignored them, and he joins me this evening from his Sheffield home. Dave Berry. Dave, evening to you.
Well, nice to be here, yes, and many people who've seen the show now wish I'd have stayed as a welder. But,
well,
that's another...
I was going to say, did you miss the welding at first? You know, you'd changed, you'd had a bit of a culture shock, hadn't you?
Well, it was a big change. We when we first started the band in just about 1960, I think it was. We were working about 4 or 5 nights each week, so that's the reason we turned professional. But yes, I think anybody who's worked before being in the music business will say that you do live through the hours of your mates at work. You know, at 10 o'clock in the morning they're having their coffee break, and I did actually live that for a year and a half, a couple of years afterwards, still thinking about my old colleagues at work. So it does stay with you, because I did have a proper job before I did this.
Well, you know, back in the 60s, you were probably one of the early performers to be given the title of pop star.
Yes, I think that's... Well, I was about the same time as the Rolling Stones and the Beatles and everyone, so I don't think we were aware. I think it had just come in, pop stars, because the previous generation, who many of them became my colleagues and still are, you know, Marty Wiles and Cliff Richards and Adam Faith, the first wave of British pop music, I can't really remember whether they were called pop stars, because generally they were working under Larry Parnes, who was a big promoter at the time, and he gave them all these unusual names, and I think they were more... The first shows I ever saw they were sort of more like these old variety artists, you know, of old, really. But many of them continued very successfully. I recently did a show, in fact, I work with Marty Wilde on a regular basis. So he's been around a lot longer than, you know, the Stones and myself and all the bands in the 60s.
Yeah, and still going strong now. Well, that's amazing, isn't it? You've toured all over the world, and, you know, you're still performing today. Do you have to pinch yourself sometimes, Dave?
I think you do, yeah, because when you start out, you're sort of so involved in sort of touring and visiting places, and I don't think because it's your job at the time, I think it's as the years go by, you look back and think, I've been, you know, how fortunate I've been to... I've, you know, been literally all over, you know, Australia, Rhodesia, when it was Rhodesia, in Africa, and all over Europe. And yes, I mean, I'm just a working class, you know, boy from not in Sheffield, but sort of the outskirts, you know, 6 miles out. So yes, I do, and I've looked back on my career and still do, and the places I've been, and the most exciting places I've been to have been in the last sort of 15, 20 years. You know, I never went to Australia in the 60s, but I was over there about 3 times, so I've done all those great things, you know, climbed the Sydney Harbour Bridge and things like that, and yes, I do. I have to pinch myself. Did this really happen?
You've still got the certificate. You've still got the certificate, I think, haven't you, Dave?
I have that. I climbed the bridge, yes. Yeah. I climbed the bridge with, I think, the lighting engineer on the tour I was involved in. We were the only ones who did it. Out of about 24 people on the tour, there was only the 2 of us. It was a challenge.
Well, I mean, what is it like, you know, just take us through doing that and what you can see when you get to the top.
Well, we chose, there was two times you could climb. And if you climbed sort of, like I say, 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, as you were coming down the arch of everybody knows the Sydney Harbour Bridge, it sweeps right down. If you go and in the evening, all the lights in Sydney come on, as they do in any major cities. So the views from the top, and then suddenly to have all the lights to come on over Sydney, that was very, very impressive. And but they were quite funny, the guides, because you're actually attached to a rail that runs all the way down. You have sort of a wire attached to your belt. And if I said to the young guy, I said, if I fell off this, would this actually hold me up? And he said, no.
Doesn't give you much confidence,
But
does it?
It was the Australian humour. Nah.
I tell you what, it's not all been plain sailing, because I've been reading your book, Stories from My Rock and Roll Scrapbook, and in 1964 you parted company with the original Cruisers. Was that an amicable parting at the time?
No, it wasn't really, but I think if you read the history of many, many bands, we start out as 4 or 5 mates, living sort of just literally next door to each other, generally with bands, and then you sign up with a record company, and you get the lead singer generally is the focal point of bands, and you get drawn away from your original lineup of musicians. And of course, Decca, when I recorded it with Decca, it never really worked in the studios for myself and the band. So they asked about using session musicians, but session musicians were not the old school musicians. And my session crew were Jimmy Page, Big Jim Sullivan, John Paul Jones, who went on to form Led Zeppelin. So they were first-class guys, and they were all sort of just a little bit younger than me. They were sort of 18, 19 years old, and they were working. So, yes. And so Decca signed me and not the band. And so he was very sad, but at the time he just get on with it, and I just accepted that's part of the music business. And but they was a very good band. I mean, I've listened to tracks since those early days. They were broadcast on the BBC live sessions, and it was a first-class team. But I equaled it by working with first-class session players. That was the most important thing.
I also read about the hairdresser from Ossett called Wendy, who said you were the father of her baby son, and the security guy who rang up a £17,000 bill calling a chat line number pretending to be you. Did that become part and parcel of the fame at the time, do you think, Dave?
Well, yeah. I mean, but anybody gets drawn into these situations, you're wondering, how did they, why me? This guy in Ossett had sort of this girl in Ossett, that was it, and she had this relationship with this guy who she'd met someone. He said he was me, and he would phone her from Edinburgh and Inverness and Plymouth. Said he was on a tour and things like that, and he called in the shop and had his hair cut there and everything, and it was all just absolutely bizarre. But the most bizarre thing is that we tried to speak to her solicitor and said, listen, if we could all meet up, and these dates that they sent through when I'm supposed to have met her, I had to contact hotels all over the country. Would you send me a letter verifying that I was staying in that hotel when this guy? But they didn't want to know, the solicitors. So we finished up actually going into the court, and I said, it sounds like a comedy. I said, well, where is this woman? And they pointed her out, and anyway, suddenly the magistrate, I think it was magistrate's court, actually said, can we just adjourn it for a moment while we have a meeting? And they asked me to lift the front of my hair, which was quite long at the time. This guy had a mole on his forehead, you see. So I'm there lifting my hair, and this girl actually must have said, well, no, it's not him.
Well, what about the guy who rang up that £17,000 phone bill then?
Well, it appears this came through. I was sat at home one day, and the ringing of the bell, and these two detectives are at the door, you see, and said, can we just have a word with you, you see? And I said, yeah, sure. So they came in, and we sort of chatted, and then I said, well, what's it about? They said, well, don't worry about it. He said, but how would someone get this photograph? I said, well, anybody can get photographs of in the music business. You know, if you go to a gig or they're signing at the merchandise, you get photographs and stuff. And it appears that this guy had been having this relationship with this woman, and he was working sort of nights, and he's been using the firm's telephone for hours and hours and hours and hours talking to this married woman. And she thought she was having these conversations with this Dave Berry. And so I just told him that I had no idea anything, who she was, anything about it, really, which I didn't. And anyway, we came to court, and I don't know, I think it must have got sent down or something, because it was quite a lot of money, and that was it. It was finished, really. That's the last I ever heard of it.
And you know, for you, worldwide gigs happened. Where would you say is the strangest place that you've played, Dave, over the years?
I think of sort of a bizarre place once. I played in, I think it was Belgium or Holland, and it was sort of a boxing ring. And so I was doing my show in the boxing, but my musicians were down at the audience level, you know, crowd level.
Yeah.
So I couldn't see the band.
Oh dear.
And the band couldn't see me. So that was quite bizarre. And also once we played a stage at a huge lake somewhere, and sort of we were about a tenth of a mile away from the nearest people in the audience, because they were the other side of the lake. And just bizarre things. There's many bizarre things in music.
Well, and you know, you've got some happy memories there, and I think one of your proudest possessions is the poster advertising the gig at the Floral Hall Ballroom in Morecambe. Why is that special to you?
Well, it was very special because Lancashire, even though I'm from Sheffield and built, you know, my following in sort of Sheffield, Manchester, for Peter Stringfellow and people like that who were great music promoters, we had very great success in Blackpool. We used to play at the Picador Club, which was attached to Bloomfield Road. Arnold Frankett, I always remember his name, and he had this fabulous club, which then went on to be owned by Johnny Kidd, who were a very successful rock artist in the 60s. And we built up a tremendous following in Blackpool, and we played the whole, about 6-7 weeks in the summer of 1962, before we recorded for Decca. And then we obviously went across to Morecambe, and that was again a regular venue for us, the Floral Hall in Morecambe, and that was the autumn of 1963 was the first tour that the first shows that the Rolling Stones had done out of the South in Morecambe, and so we were on there with the Rolling Stones, the Mersey Beats, and one or two other local bands. So that was very special. But they said there were those gigs, Blackpool particularly, and Morecambe were very special when you're building up a following, when you're starting out in a band. That was the thing. We had a following around the country before we made records.
And you know, Bill Wyman says some lovely things about you in the book, doesn't he?
Well, yeah, because I mean, Andrew Lou Golden, who managed the Stones at the time, was my publicist in London. So obviously I was involved. I think I did 3 tours with the Stones, and I had the opportunity to go with Immediate Records that Andrew Golden started. So so I had great communication with the Stones, and in the early days for about a 3-year period, 3 tours. So very special because we were playing a similar sort of music. We were all basing our music on R&B and blues, Muddy Waters, Chuck Berry especially. And so we're all doing this pretty much the same roots music, which has continued to this day. I mean, the Stones are a great sort of roots band, and we're still following the same path, really.
Yeah, and they did a sellout concert at Anfield last week, of course, the Stones. I saw some lovely photos of Mick Jagger. He went round Liverpool to, you know, the places, the Empire Theatre where he played years and years ago. He took a selfie.
Yes.
He went to see the statue of Cilla Black. It was really on a trip down memory lane for him last week.
Oh, it was, yes. I mean, I was on those tours, the theatre tours, and in '64, '65, I think it was. And we all tend to remember the early days, especially as we get older. I think it is in life, even when you have what you can call a sort of regular job, not in music. You sort of tend to remember your first work experiences and the first time you travel. I mean, I travelled into Hamburg and Hanover in Germany, again in '62. That was a sort of an eye-opener for, again, a young band. Suddenly you're on the Reaper band in Hamburg and mixing with all sorts of weird and wonderful people.
Let's chat about a couple of songs that Dave McGurty from Barrow wrote. The first song I'm going to play for you, I think 1968 he wrote this, Yesterday's Sunshine. Tell me about this song.
Yes, he did. It was a song that at that time I'd not met Dave, but I think he'd sent the song to possibly Mike Smith, who was my record producer at Decca Records. So it was a great song. I enjoyed the performance and the feel of the song, and but unfortunately it was never released, which was not to say it's not a brilliant song. It's just that there's many songs that artists record that are never released. And so David contacted me many years on, about 7 or 8 years ago, I think it was. And I had a trip up to Barrow and performed the song live at a club there with Dave and a little band. And so that was good. And then he contacted me again about recording a couple of tracks with him that he'd written with his son.
Well,
and it's been very successful with all the plays. It's been played by Mike Reed and on his radio station, David Hamilton and people like that. And many radio stations like yourself around the country have picked up on it.
Well, let's hear it. This is Yesterday's Sunshine on BBC Radio Cumbria and BBC Radio Lancashire.
Time goes so slow, it's not easy to live in the memory of love that you gave to me. Yesterday's sunshine has gone. Baby, I keep on picturing you and your smile keeps on haunting me all of the while. Now that yesterday's sunshine has gone. Oh baby, something's got a hold of my heart. Now I'm waiting for the crying to start. Baby, something's gotta give, or I don't wanna live. Something's got a hold of my heart. There was a time I could easily have laughed in your face, but now you're not easily replaced, and the world is an unfriendly place. Baby, I keep on picturing you and your smile keeps on haunting me all of the while. Now that yesterday's sunshine has gone. Oh baby, something's got a hold of my heart. Now I'm waiting for the crying to start. Baby, something's gotta give, or I don't wanna live. Something's got a hold of my heart. Baby, something's got a hold of my heart. Now I'm waiting for the crying to start. Baby, something's gotta give, or I don't wanna live. Something's got a hold of my heart.
Yesterday's Sunshine with my guest Dave Berry this evening, written by songwriter from Barrow, Dave McGurty. I think he wrote that, as I was saying, Dave, about 1968, and you've been up to see him recently and recorded it.
Yes, that's right. In Derby, in Cumbria, yes.
Cumbria. I said also earlier that you're still touring. In fact, you'll be touring this year in the autumn, I think. Not a lot of dates booked in at the moment, but you're touring with some pretty big names from the 60s and 70s, aren't you?
Yes, I am, and I just every couple of years I do a tour. I did one. The most recent one was last November. That's for about a 32-night tour. That was with PJ Proby, Herman's Hermits, and a whole team of Marmalade and Tremolos. So it's great because it's always a good atmosphere because I've known a lot of the guys a long time, and it's like in any work situation, you're chatting about funny things that's happened and things that you can't repeat on the radio that's happened. And
yeah. What goes on tour stays on tour.
Don't worry.
Fabulous. Do you still get a buzz out of touring?
I do, fortunately, yeah. I mean, I actually love it. I think when I first started, and I knew from not from the very, very beginning, because we were all thinking, well, none of us knew how long it would last. But I think after 3 or 4 years, I realised that this is the life I wanted. Like the jazz musicians of old and the blues players, and repeating again from like Keith Richards from the Stones said that they wanted to play all their careers. They'd seen these blues guys who played into the sort of 70s and 80s, and that's what I wanted to do. And I pursued that all the time. I tried to present a good mixture of stuff in my show. It's not all just 60s. I like to play some of the bluesy stuff and R&B classics, and to keep the show fresh. Do a couple of Bob Dylan tracks and things like that. But I enjoy the lifestyle. Yes, I still enjoy traveling by car, sitting in the car, which many people get bored with. I love that sort of 4 or 5 hours and hotels, backstage, a few drinks after the show and sometimes before the show, and just have a good time, really.
And I think, in the early days, you decided to do something that when you were on tour, because obviously a lot of the bands, a lot of the performers slept most of the day, but you were up and about and out and looking at antiques, I think, weren't you?
I did, yeah. I mean, I still do. I mean, I think that it's, life is there to sort of educate yourself as well, and see things. And to give you an idea, I mean, I've visited sort of Niagara Falls, Victoria Falls. Here in the UK, I've walked the Cotswolds Way 100 miles, over a week for a holiday, just to see different things and enjoy travelling. And with antiques, I just wanted to have a sort of something to be doing during the day instead of sort of staying in bed till sort of 1 o'clock and as many musicians do, and just getting up for the afternoons. I wanted to sort of go out and about. So I started with antiques. I'd always been interested. One of our roadies in the 60s first introduced me to it, because what he would do, he was the driving the band around, and he would stop off and buy a few items in, I don't know, Wolverhampton, and travel down to Plymouth and go and sell them on and make a little profit in sort of somewhere like Plymouth or wherever we were travelling. And I thought, well, this is disgrace, something of interest, and that's what I did. And I've done quite a lot of antique fairs, and I've had sort of units in antique centres, and still travel around, and if I'm not doing the gigs, have another interest.
A very busy man. Let's play the second song now. This one co-written with Dave McGurty's son, Dave Jr., the one that got away. Tell me about this one.
This one, they sent me the track through a few months ago, and I had to listen to it. Thought it was a very good song. What we wanted to do with both these songs, really, I'd recorded blues albums, and I've recorded sort of in the 80s, sort of the synthesizer albums, but I felt that the time was right for me to do something and recreate the 60s sound, the Phil Spector sound, the big banks of equipment and the sounds from the band. And so that it was intentionally to sound like a 60s feel. and I think we achieved that, and good production, a good studio, and good songwriters, which is part and parcel of the music industry.
Well, let's hear it. This is The One That Got Away, Dave Berry.
I don't ever mean to hurt you, baby. I'll never take for granted all that we've got. But there's one thing you gotta know. I've given my heart and my soul to a love that just couldn't stay. The one that got away. So if I ever seem a little distant, forgive me, I would never stray that way. But these feelings, they never go. Once you've given your heart and your soul to a love that just couldn't stay. The one that got away. So there's one thing you gotta know before you stand up and walk out the door. Baby, you gotta believe it's not my intention to leave. Never intended to be the one that got away. One that got away. So baby, won't you stay? So baby, won't you stay?
Dave Berry, The One That Got Away, written by Dave McGurty and Dave Jr. from Barrow. I've got to say the big production on that one, Dave. A great sort of sound, and I think that's what you wanted to create, wasn't it?
That was exactly what we wanted to create, yes. So the boys at the studio and Dave did a great job with it, yes. Excellent.
Well, on the tour, I mean, you like to play a bit of your own stuff, a bit of new stuff, but someone else. Are you including that when you're on tour, those songs?
Yes. I don't do it every night, but yes, I've put it into the show, yes. So
Brilliant.
the band enjoyed it. It's been really good, yeah.
And, you know, I've been reading stories from my rock and roll scrapbook, some amazing stories, great selection of photographs as well. Was that important too? I think just, you know, flicking through it, you've got photographs on every page. And I think you read and then you look forward to turning the next page to see the photographs and the story that goes with it.
Yeah, I think, well, we've all sort of read biographies and autobiographies, and generally it's just all sort of scripted, you know, there's sort of 8 pages of photographs in the middle of the book, and that's it. But we just wanted to, because I like, when I'm reading things, I like to see lots of photographs, and so the people are more interested in, you know, seeing who you've worked with and the place that you've been and your past, you know, career, or your beginning of your career, early pictures and later pictures with a lot of these sort of later artists. So that's what it was intentionally to present a book like that. Yes,
I think it was out about 10 years ago. Is it still available today? The book?
It is, yeah, but it's been out for 10 years. But I think autobiographies and biographies they never lose anything. I mean, if you read a Frank Sinatra biography, not as though I compare myself to Frank Sinatra, even the book might have been written 30 years ago, but it's all relevant because it's all of the history of the artist.
Do you sell it with the merch? Do you sell it with the merch when you're on tour?
Oh, yes.
Get the merchandise out. Eh?
Yes, get the merch out. Pay the expenses.
I've got to say and talk to you finally about your first TV appearance. That was at Border Television in Carlisle.
It was, yeah. It was the days when, the artist to promote your singles would tour the country, and you'd be in sort of Bristol on the, points west or something, and then you'd be down in Plymouth for the Devon and Cornwall. So you travelled the country, and Memphis, Tennessee, when that was released, I think it was November 1963. The very first TV show I ever did was at Border TV. So I came up there all the way from Derbyshire, and which was at that time was the old A6. I think it took about 5 hours to get there.
Wow, yeah, no motorway in those days.
No,
much easier now.
Carlisle for me is a place I've been visiting, the Sands, and then the famous Talk of the Border in Carlisle. Many of your listeners would remember that. That was a crazy place, and we were there for a week, 3 or 4 times each year doing the shows there. So I've got great memories, yeah.
Yeah, happy memories. It's been lovely to chat to you tonight, Dave. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. And 2 great songs there, written by Cumbrian songwriter Dave McGurty and his son Dave Jr., which I know you're very pleased with, and I think people give you a lot of reaction to those songs, don't they?
Yes, they do, yes. So, thanking them on air from me. Great tracks, well recorded, good production, and great studio to work, the Farm Studios in Egremont, yeah.
Well, lovely to chat with you tonight. Hopefully we'll chat again when the tour gets underway in the autumn, and maybe you'll be coming to Lancashire and Cumbria as well. Ed Sheeran, 2-Step, 12 minutes to 11. What a great guest tonight. Dave Berry, thanks for joining us this evening.